The silence of space was shattered by the soft hum of the Mind Ripper as it drifted into position, its dark hull blending seamlessly with the infinite black around it. The Zenthari ship, a marvel of advanced engineering, loomed like a predatory shadow, its sleek design a testament to centuries of technological dominance. On the bridge, Commander Vex sat in his command chair, his cold gaze fixed on the small human transport ship drifting helplessly in the distance. He stretched his long arms above his head, the alien metal of his armor shifting with the motion. "Ready to commence, Commander?" Lieutenant Kith asked, his voice as impassive as the ship's sensors. Vex barely acknowledged him, his eyes narrowing as he studied the fragile human vessel on the viewport. It looked more like a floating collection of scrap than a functional ship. The humans had no concept of elegance or precision, their creations ugly and inefficient. Yet, they persisted, each new generation somehow clinging to life, always surviving despite their obvious inferiority. "Let them be," Vex muttered. "We've done this before. Let's see what these humans can do when they realize how powerless they are." The bridge was quiet except for the steady hum of the ship's systems, the crew's routine now a practice dance. The Mind Ripper was a ship designed for a single purpose, the study of other species. It wasn't just a research vessel, it was a mobile laboratory, an execution chamber, and an executioner, all wrapped into one. The Zenthari had taken countless specimens, tested them beyond any reasonable expectation, but there was something uniquely satisfying about studying humans. They were fragile, yet their resilience was a curiosity the aliens couldn't ignore. "Tractor beam engaged," announced Sergeant BL from the weapons console, his voice devoid of emotion. The small human ship began to slowly drift toward the docking bay, its feeble thrusters barely able to push it forward. Vex glanced at the display, his face twisting into a sneer. So much effort to survive for this. They should have known better. The Mind Ripper's docking bay opened, its massive doors creaking as they parted to reveal the small, barely functional human ship. The ship, dubbed Starlight Runner by its crew, was barely big enough to hold a dozen passengers, its hull patched together with mismatched plates and scrap metal. It was a marvel of human stubbornness, the kind of vessel that shouldn't have survived a single flight, yet it had traversed half the galaxy. The alien ship's tractor beam pulled it in with ease, and soon the human vessel was nestled in the docking bay, the doors closing behind it with a resounding thud. "Prepare for boarding," Vex ordered as he stood up from his chair, his voice as cold as the metal walls around him. "This will be quick. Make sure the human knows she's not in control." Luna Hayes stood at the front of the ship, her hands gripping the worn metal railing as the tractor beam tugged the Starlight Runner forward. She had known something was off the moment they entered the sector. She had heard rumors, but she never imagined it would be her ship. Not like this. She didn't panic. That would be useless. Instead, she moved swiftly, checking the status of the crew and preparing herself for the worst. The ship's distress beacon was already active, sending a weak signal into the void, but she knew it was too late. They were too far from any human-controlled sectors. No one would reach them in time. The airlock hissed open, and Luna stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. The Zenthari had arrived. A tall figure, clad in dark, shimmering armor, appeared in the doorway. His eyes gleamed with cold calculation as he surveyed the small crew, his posture one of dominance. His voice was deep, like the grinding of stone, when he spoke. "You will come with us," Commander Vex ordered, his gaze fixed on Luna. "No one needs to get hurt. Unless you make it difficult." Luna, despite the situation, couldn't help but laugh. The alien was towering, far larger than she was, and his presence was oppressive. But there was something absurd about it all. He was a creature from a distant galaxy, commanding a warship capable of destroying entire fleets, and yet here he was, acting like he was dealing with some fragile, frightened human. "I'm not making it difficult," Luna replied, her voice steady but laced with sarcasm. "You're the one boarding my ship and dragging us into your little toy box." Vex's lips twitched, but he didn't smile. "Stubborn, just like the rest of your kind," he muttered. "Take her." Two Zenthari soldiers moved forward, grabbing Luna by the arms and pulling her towards the airlock. She didn't resist, but her eyes stayed locked on Vex, a silent challenge that neither side could ignore. As they dragged her into the depths of the Mind Ripper, Luna observed everything around her with a kind of detached curiosity. The ship was a labyrinth of gleaming, metallic corridors, and she couldn't help but marvel at the Zenthree's technological prowess. Their ship was a fortress, an oppressive environment designed not for comfort, but for complete control. She was led to a stark, sterile room, the research lab, where she was strapped down to a table that seemed far too cold, too clinical. The restraints were unnecessary, she had no intention of fighting back just yet. But she wasn't afraid. Not yet. Her thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Dr. Kith, the lead researcher who had been overseeing the capture. He adjusted a set of alien instruments on a nearby table, his movements quick and precise. "You're very calm for someone about to be tortured," Dr. Kith noted, as he looked at Luna through the lens of his alien, multiple eyes. "Curious. Most subjects break before we even begin." Luna met his gaze with defiance, her hands resting casually against the cold metal of the table. "Maybe I'm just not impressed by your toys," she said, her voice even but firm. "Or maybe I've just seen better." The aliens chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly sound. It was the kind of laughter that came from a place of superiority, as though Luna were nothing more than a nuisance. Vex stood at the far end of the room, observing silently, his expression unreadable. He had dealt with many species, but humans were different. Always so unpredictable. Their fragility was a challenge, but their stubbornness was what intrigued him. "Start with the neural stimulator," he commanded, his voice low and cold. The Zenthary researchers began their preparations. The cold, mechanical nature of the process was almost poetic. There were no personal grudges, no hatred, just a clinical dissection of a species they viewed as little more than insects. But Luna wasn't an insect. And despite their best efforts, they hadn't broken her yet. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that filled the sterile corridors of the Mind Ripper, a Zenthary research vessel as menacing as its name suggested. It was massive, built for power, and operated with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Everything about it was designed for one purpose: to study, to capture, and to conquer. Commander Vex stood at the bridge, gazing out at the vast emptiness of space through the viewport. His sharp eyes locked onto the small human transport ship, drifting helplessly in the distance. It was a pitiful sight, a rickety collection of metal, barely able to sustain itself. Humans were known for their stubbornness, their ability to survive against impossible odds, but today, Vex thought, they would learn the price of their defiance. "Bring them in," Vex commanded, his voice cold, carrying an air of finality. The ship's tractor beam activated with a low hum, and the small human vessel was slowly drawn toward the Mind Ripper's docking bay. Lieutenant Kith and his team of researchers moved quickly to their stations, preparing for the arrival of their new specimen. Vex leaned back in his chair, his mind already calculating the information they would glean from this new subject. Another human, another test, another data point in their pursuit of scientific dominance. The human ship shuddered as it entered the docking bay, its hull creaking under the pressure of the tractor beam. The massive doors closed behind it with a metallic clang. Vex's eyes narrowed as he stood from his seat, heading toward the elevator that would take him to the cargo hold. Luna Hayes stood in the cramped cockpit of her ship, staring out at the approaching alien vessel. Her heart raced as the reality of the situation set in. There was no escape. The Zenthary had caught them. Her fingers tightened around the control panel, but she didn't panic. There was no point. Panicking would only make things worse. Her ship, the Starlight Runner, had been a last-minute purchase, a patchwork of old parts and unreliable systems. It had been good enough to get her across sectors, but it wasn't designed for a confrontation like this. The ship's distress signal was already active, but Luna knew they were too far from any human-controlled space to expect a quick rescue. "Brace for impact," she muttered under her breath. The sudden jolt of the ship's gravity system being overridden threw her off balance. She stumbled against the wall, but quickly regained her footing. A harsh mechanical sound echoed through the ship's hull as the tractor beam latched onto it, pulling them in like a fish on a hook. The Mind Ripper's docking bay was vast and cold. Vex stood at the entrance, his gaze fixed on the small human vessel as it was dragged inside. He couldn't help but feel a fleeting sense of amusement. The size difference between the two ships was absurd. The human vessel could fit comfortably inside the cargo bay of the Mind Ripper, with room to spare. As the ship settled into place, a squad of Zenthari soldiers moved forward, their weapons holstered but ready. They were trained for this. They had done it hundreds of times before, capturing species far more dangerous than this. Humans were no different. The airlock hissed open, and a small figure stepped out, hands raised in what appeared to be a gesture of surrender. Luna Hayes was young, no older than 25 by human standards. Her dark hair fell in messy waves around her face, and her defiant eyes locked onto the aliens before her. She barely reached the shoulder of the nearest soldier, her frame slight and unimposing. Well, Vex said, his voice low, almost amused. What do we have here? He took a step forward, circling Luna like a predator sizing up its prey. Luna didn't flinch. She stood tall despite the circumstances, her body rigid with determination. I'm Luna Hayes, she said, her voice steady. Passenger aboard the merchant vessel Starlight Runner. I demand to know why you've attacked a civilian transport. Vex raised an eyebrow. Demand? He chuckled, a sharp, metallic sound. You seem to think you have rights here. How quaint. Lieutenant Kith and the others laughed, their voices a chorus of derision. Kith, with his multiple eyes and long limbs, found the human's bravado particularly amusing. A lost little human, thinking she's in control. How adorable, Kith sneered. Luna kept her eyes locked on Vex, ignoring the mocking laughter of the others. I'm not lost, she said coldly. And I'm not afraid. Vex tilted his head slightly, intrigued. Humans were often scared, helpless in the face of their superior technology. But not this one. There was a certain stubbornness in her gaze that he found oddly captivating. Let me educate you, Miss Hayes, Vex said, stepping closer. You are aboard the Zenthari research vessel, the Mind Ripper. Your vessel has been requisitioned for scientific purposes. As have you. Luna's jaw tightened. She had heard rumors of alien abductions, but nothing had prepared her for this. The word requisitioned hung in the air like a death sentence. You can't do this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You have no right to. Oh, but we do, Vex interrupted, his voice smooth, authoritative. You see, humans are renowned for one thing in the galaxy, your resilience in the face of inevitable defeat. We've studied countless species, but yours is particularly fascinating. Luna's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms. She wasn't sure how she would survive this, but she knew she would. She had to. For herself, for her crew, for the human race. Vex gestured to his soldiers, signaling them to take her. Take her to the lab. Start with the standard protocols. We'll see how long she lasts before the begging begins. As Luna was escorted through the cold, metallic corridors of the Mind Ripper, her mind raced. She had no idea what awaited her, but she knew one thing, she wasn't going to break. Not today. Not ever. The doors to the research lab opened with a soft hiss. Inside, the sterile, almost clinical atmosphere hit her immediately. The table she was strapped to was cold, unforgiving. The bright lights above made everything feel harsh and sharp. But she wasn't afraid. She had been through worse. She would survive this too. The alien doctors began preparing their instruments, their eyes glinting with cold curiosity. Dr. Kith stepped forward, his hands adjusting a set of tools designed for human anatomy. Welcome to my laboratory, Miss Hayes, he said, his voice a clinical tone. I do hope you'll find your stay educational. Luna didn't speak, her eyes locked on the Zenthari scientist as they began the procedure. She would give them no satisfaction, no victory. Her resolve was firm. She was human, and humans didn't break. The procedure began, and as the first wave of pain hit her, Luna's lips curled into a small, almost mocking smile. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The cold, sterile lab buzzed with an eerie calm, the quiet hum of machinery only interrupted by the occasional metallic clink of instruments being prepared. The Mind Ripper's research facility was not designed for comfort, nor was it intended to inspire any sense of safety. It was a place where life and death held no more meaning than a lab rat's struggle in a cage. The walls, made of gleaming alien materials, reflected the harsh overhead lights that gave the entire room an almost clinical appearance. Luna Hayes lay strapped to the examination table, her wrists and ankles bound by restraints designed for a species far stronger than human. But none of that mattered now. She was beyond fear. The Zenthari scientists, led by Dr. Kith, stood around her, their cold eyes scanning her every movement. The room was filled with instruments that Luna could only imagine the horrors of. They had been watching her for the past hour as she resisted, even as her body screamed in pain, holding on to a strength she didn't know she had. But she wasn't going to break. Not yet. "Prepare the neural stimulator," Dr. Kith ordered, his voice cutting through the silence. The alien technician, Grizz, moved swiftly to a console, typing a few commands into the terminal before the machine activated with a software. It was an instrument designed to send waves of excruciating pain through the nervous system, breaking down mental resistance. The very thing that had broken so many before her. Luna's chest rose and fell with steady breaths. She had endured pain before, but she wasn't sure how much longer she could take this. The last hours had been a blur of needles, strange chemicals, and the relentless hum of alien machinery. Her limbs ached. Her head throbbed. But she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her struggle. Dr. Kith leaned over her, his many eyes watching her with a detached curiosity, as though studying an insect. "Let's see how long you can last, little human," he said softly. "Your species is famous for being resilient, but even the most stubborn creatures break eventually." Luna forced herself to meet his gaze, her lips curling into a smile, though it was strained. "I've lasted longer than most," she replied through clenched teeth. "I'll last longer than you think." Kith's eyes flickered with something like amusement. He gestured to Korith, the lead technician, who activated the neural stimulator. The machine whined to life, and Luna's body stiffened instantly. The first wave of energy shot through her nervous system, burning its way down her spine and into her limbs. Her back arched against the restraints, her teeth gritting as she fought to keep her breath steady. But the pain kept coming, wave after wave, each one more intense than the last. Her muscles seized involuntarily, and for a moment, she thought she might lose control. Her vision blurred as the pain intensified, the room spinning around her. Her mind screamed for relief, but she forced herself to focus, to fight back the urge to beg for mercy. That was what they wanted. That was the one thing she would never give them. Time seemed to stretch, every second a brutal eternity. Luna's body trembled under the onslaught, but her mind remained sharp. She focused on the small things, the things that couldn't be taken from her, her breath, the sensation of the cold metal against her skin, the distant hum of the ship. She was still here. She was still alive. "Remarkable," Dr. Kith said, his voice almost clinical as he observed the readings on his screen. "Most subjects show signs of mental breakdown within the first few minutes. But you, human, you seem to be holding up." Luna's lips parted, her breath shallow, but she didn't speak. She couldn't afford to let them know how much this was costing her. She had to stay silent. She had to stay strong. But even the strongest minds had limits. The pain built, one wave after another, until Luna's body could no longer hold back. Her vision went white as the stimulator intensified. Her breath hitched. She could feel her heart racing in her chest, every beat thunderous in her ears. And then she died. Her heart stopped. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, everything went still. There was no sound, no pain, only silence. A kind of peace she had never experienced before. When Luna's eyes opened again, the world around her had changed. The pain was gone. The lights above her flickered dimly, and the restraints that held her were no longer necessary. She didn't feel weak. In fact, she felt more alive than ever. But something was different. Luna's breath was steady, even as her pulse returned to normal. Her limbs, once stiff with pain, felt free. She tested the movement of her fingers, flexing them slowly. The physical wounds were gone, as though they had never existed. Impossible. The room was still. The Zenthari scientists were frozen in place, staring at her, their eyes wide in disbelief. They had not expected this. Luna blinked, focusing on the alien faces around her. She could feel the weight of their stares, the shock in their expressions. But there was no fear. Not in her. She had died. But she had returned. What? What is this? Dr. Kit's voice trembled slightly as he approached, his many eyes scanning her form. Luna smiled, though the movement of her lips felt foreign, like she was still waking up from a deep sleep. What's the matter, Doc? Didn't expect me to get back up? Kit's voice faltered. You were dead. Your brain activity stopped. You should be gone. Luna sat up slowly, the cold table beneath her now feeling like a distant memory. She could feel their fear. The Zenthari might have seen countless subjects break under their methods, but they hadn't prepared for this. I don't die that easily, Luna said quietly, her voice steady as she swung her legs over the side of the table and stood. The room was silent. The Zenthari had never encountered anything like this. Korath stumbled backward, his eyes locked on the now active readings on the screen. The neural stimulator was still humming, but Luna was completely unaffected. Impossible. Impossible, Korath muttered under his breath. We saw you die. Luna raised an eyebrow, her voice laced with quiet mockery. Oh, I'm sure you did. But you missed the part where I come back. Dr. Kith took a step forward, his confidence slipping. This cannot be. You should be dead. Luna's smile faded slightly, her eyes glinting with something new. I don't think you understand, document death isn't the end for humans. It's just a pause. The Zenthari stood frozen, staring at Luna as the meaning of her words sank in. She had died, and now she had returned. And she wasn't going to stop. Her gaze moved over each of them, lingering on Dr. Kith as he backed away slowly. There was a glimmer of fear in his many eyes now, something they hadn't anticipated. No one breaks us, Luna whispered, her voice low but powerful. Not even you. With that, Luna turned toward the exit. She had already won. The cold, sterile lab hummed with a low, mechanical rhythm as Luna stood, her feet planted firmly on the cold metal floor. The restraints had fallen away, as though they had never existed. No signs of struggle, no evidence of the torment she had endured only moments before. The neural stimulator's display screen blinked erratically, its once steady readings now completely off the charts. Luna's heartbeat had stopped, but now it was back, steady, controlled, just as it had always been. The room's inhabitants, the Zenthari researchers, stood frozen. Their gazes were fixed on her, each one struggling to comprehend the impossibility of what they were witnessing. Luna Hayes had died. And now she was alive. Dr. Kith was the first to recover, though his face remained pale, his body rigid. How are you standing? You should be, he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The thought of her return, so soon after death, shattered his understanding of biology and physiology. Everything they knew, everything they had observed about other species, seemed irrelevant in the face of this anomaly. Luna took a slow, deliberate step forward, testing the weight of her body. She felt no pain, no weakness. Her limbs were strong, even stronger than before, as though the process of dying had somehow reset her. She stretched her arms above her head, enjoying the feeling of freedom, as though she had just awoken from a long nap. Well, this is interesting, Luna mused, her voice calm, almost too calm. I guess your little experiment wasn't as effective as you thought. The room was silent, the Zenthari scientists too stunned to speak. They had anticipated her breaking, had expected the usual surrender that came with their methods. But this was something else entirely. Korath, standing near the console, looked at the data streaming across the monitors. His fingers flew over the controls, trying to make sense of the numbers. This can't be right, he muttered. The readings are impossible. We have all the data. You should have failed. You should have died. Luna's lips curled into a faint smile. I told you. I don't die that easily. She looked over at Dr. Kith, who stood rigid, his mind racing. The alien's obsession with control was apparent. Every test subject they had ever studied had been broken by their methods, by their technology. But this human had broken them. Why? Kith finally asked, his voice shaky. How did you survive? How are you here? Luna's gaze softened slightly, but the resolve in her eyes remained unchanged. You see, you've made a mistake, she said slowly, her words deliberate. You think you understand humans. You think you understand life, death, and pain. But you don't. You've underestimated us, and now you're paying the price. Underestimated? Kith's voice was incredulous. You're dead. How can you possibly? I wasn't dead, Luna interrupted, her voice cold now. I was just taking a break. Humans don't stay dead for long. We're not like you. The words hung in the air, heavy with an unspoken truth. Luna had died, but she had come back. And in that moment, the Zenthari understood something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer in control. She was. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. The Zenthari, for all their intelligence and technology, were helpless. The death of Luna Hayes, the very thing they had relied on to break her, had become her greatest weapon. Dr. Kith's eyes flickered from Luna to the data screens. You're not even human anymore, he whispered, a note of fear creeping into his voice. You've transcended biology. Your physiology, it's not possible. Luna tilted her head, considering his words. You think I'm something different, something outside the boundaries of your understanding? Maybe I am. But I'm still human. She stepped forward, her voice growing firmer with each word. You think your technology is the key to everything, but it's nothing. You can't control us. Not like you think. Grizz, one of the alien technicians who had been standing nearby, took a nervous step back. What? What are you going to do now? Luna's gaze turned to him, and for the first time, there was no humor in her eyes. Only a quiet, knowing calm. Now. I'm going to make sure you never get the chance to play with another human again. She turned toward the door, and in that moment, everything seemed to shift. The air felt charged, as though the very space around her had changed. Luna's every movement seemed deliberate, controlled, as if she was no longer a mere human, but something more. She was power, embodied. Kith, who had been the most composed of them all, suddenly found his confidence faltering. You can't leave. We haven't finished with you. You can't just. I can, Luna said, her voice unwavering. And I will. She reached the door, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the metal control panel. Without looking back, she pressed a few buttons, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. But as it did, Luna's mind raced, and she could feel the shift in the energy around her. She wasn't just leaving. She was taking control. The Zenthari had thought they understood power. They had studied species across galaxies, reduced them to test subjects, and broken their spirits. But they had never encountered a human like Luna Hayes before. As the door opened, Luna stepped into the corridor, her footsteps echoing through the silent halls of the Mind Ripper. She could hear the faint hum of the ship's engines, the low pulse of its power systems, but now it all felt secondary. This ship, this entire operation, had once been a symbol of Zenthari might. But now, it felt like a cage. Stop her! Kith shouted, his voice filled with growing panic. But it was too late. Luna didn't need to run. She didn't need to hide. She was the one in control now. As she walked through the corridor, Luna smiled to herself. She didn't need to break their technology. She didn't need to overpower them physically. Her strength was in something far deeper. In something they could never understand. She could hear the frantic shouts of the Zenthari behind her, their desperation growing. They were chasing her, trying to stop her, but she wasn't afraid. She didn't need to be. She had already won. Luna paused for a moment, her gaze settling on a small window that overlooked the vast emptiness of space. The stars blinked softly in the distance, indifferent to the struggle that had just taken place inside the walls of the Mind Ripper. Next time, she whispered to herself, don't underestimate us. Then, with a final glance over her shoulder, Luna Hayes turned and walked deeper into the heart of the Zenthary ship, ready to finish what she had started. The corridor stretched before her like an endless tunnel, its walls humming with the cold pulse of the Mind Ripper's engines. The ship was massive, and it felt strangely silent now, as if the Zenthary had forgotten how to move without the oppressive weight of their superiority. Luna's steps were measured, calm. She had nothing to prove, nothing to fear. The power of the ship, its advanced technology, its vast crew, none of it mattered. She had already broken their most important rule: humans were not to be underestimated. The ship's bright, clinical lights flickered overhead as Luna walked past, her eyes scanning the environment with a mix of purpose and curiosity. The walls here were sleek, almost too smooth, the sterile design betraying the brutality of the Zenthary's intent. But there was one thing Luna understood above all else: this ship, despite its might, was just a prison. And she was its new master. She had barely made it to the control center when the voice of Commander Vex crackled over the comm system. His voice was tight, strained. "Miss Hayes, wherever you are, you will stop now. We have ways of making you regret this." Luna paused. Her lips curved into a smile. Vex had always been too confident. Too sure of himself. "I'm not going to stop, Commander," Luna replied calmly, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. "You should have understood by now, there's nothing you can do to make me regret anything." There was a pause before Vex's voice came through again, the frustration obvious. "You are still just a human. You think you've won. But you haven't. This ship is ours. We will make you pay for this." "I'm not a prisoner anymore," Luna said, her voice cold. "And I don't intend to be. If you want me, you'll have to come and get me." Vex's silence was the only answer. Luna turned away from the comm panel, her gaze narrowing as she thought about what was coming. The Zenthary might have had the ship, but she now had control over it. And that terrified them. Luna found her way to the central control room, a sleek, dark space filled with consoles and glowing panels. There was a tense, strange stillness in the air, the room echoing with the sounds of her movements. As she approached the central console, she could feel the weight of their eyes on her. The Zenthary must have been watching, tracking her progress from every angle. But Luna didn't care. She was past caring. They couldn't stop her now. Korith and Dr. Kith had undoubtedly realized what had happened by now: their technology was useless against her. The neural stimulator had been their weapon, but they had no idea what they were dealing with. Luna wasn't just surviving, she was adapting, growing stronger with each second. She reached out and pressed a few keys on the console, the familiar hum of alien technology responding to her touch. For the first time, she felt the full weight of the ship's systems open to her. This was her moment. The Zenthary's elaborate machinery, their precious controls, the very lifeblood of their ship, it was all hers. Dr. Kith stood in the ship's observation room, watching Luna's movements through the screens. His mind raced, calculating. They couldn't allow this. They couldn't let her control the ship. His hands trembled slightly as he examined the data streams coming in from the central console. Luna had already bypassed several security systems, and now she was tampering with the core functionality of the Mind Ripper's mainframe. "This isn't possible," Kith muttered under his breath, his voice tight with disbelief. She can't understand our technology. She should be breaking under the stress." But Luna wasn't breaking. She wasn't just surviving, she was mastering the ship. And as Kith stared at the screen, a creeping feeling began to gnaw at him. What if she wasn't just another human? The doors behind him slid open, and Commander Vex entered, his expression dark, the weight of his authority still intact despite the shifting power. He walked up to Kith's side, his hands clasped behind his back. "What's the situation?" Vex asked, his voice low and dangerous. She's manipulating the ship's systems, Kith said, his voice shaking ever so slightly. I don't know how, but she is. Vex didn't answer right away. He stared at the screen, watching Luna with something like growing admiration. She wasn't fighting their technology, she was bending it to her will. That was dangerous. That was a threat they hadn't prepared for. Commander, Kith finally said, his voice urgent. We need to act now. If she gains control of the entire ship, we'll lose everything. Vex's eyes narrowed as he watched the girl, his fists clenching at his sides. He had underestimated her. All of them had. Humans, no matter how fragile, could not be treated as mere test subjects. This one, Luna Hayes, was no ordinary human. She will be stopped, Vex said coldly, the promise of retribution hanging in the air. He turned toward Kith. We'll use her own mistakes against her. Get the neural disruptors ready. We're not letting her take the ship. Kith nodded, his fear still present but masked by a professional exterior. They still had power, if only they could regain control. Meanwhile, Luna was already several steps ahead. As she navigated the ship's mainframe, a surge of pride flooded her chest. She was doing it, she was taking the ship. But she wasn't just going to leave. She was going to make a statement. She didn't need to destroy it, she needed to show them that they weren't the masters anymore. Her fingers danced over the keys, reprogramming key systems, turning their weapons into useless metal. This was her message: you cannot break humans. You cannot control them. She hit a few final keys, her eyes fixed on the ship's exterior cameras. A satisfied smile crossed her face as she watched the Zenthari soldiers on deck begin to scramble, no doubt in response to her tampering. And then, the lights dimmed. The comm system hummed with static, cutting in and out as the Zenthari realized something was wrong. Luna had given them one last lesson. Vex and Kith turned toward the flashing red lights as they began to pulse with increasing urgency. The Mind Ripper's systems were in full-blown chaos. Panels blinked and hummed, the ship's once orderly command system now frayed at the edges. Luna's imprint was everywhere, and the Zenthari were powerless to undo it. Kit's voice was tight with panic. She's bypassing everything. She's controlling the mainframe. We're losing the ship. Vex stepped forward, his voice calm but edged with cold fury. No. We have to take it back. But deep down, even Vex knew, it was already too late. The moment Luna had accessed the core systems, she had won. The battle for control had shifted, and it wasn't going to end with the Zenthari in charge. Luna paused for a moment, letting the chaos unfold around her. She could hear the distant shouts of Zenthari soldiers through the comms, their voices growing more frantic with every passing second. She had done it. She had turned the tables. As she leaned back in the command chair, her eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. You'll never understand, will you? She whispered to herself, watching the chaos she'd orchestrated. You'll never learn. But I will. We always do. And as Luna Hayes took control of the Mind Ripper, she knew this was just the beginning. The real battle hadn't even started yet. The Mind Ripper shook slightly as Luna pressed her palm against the control panel. The ship had never felt so alive, its thrusters humming beneath her fingertips like a sentient creature. For the first time, Luna was no longer a prisoner. She was in control, and the power surged through her, filling every fiber of her being with a sense of quiet triumph. But it was more than that. It was a deep, resonant understanding of something greater. The Zenthari had thought they could break her, manipulate her, destroy her. But they didn't understand the one thing that humans had always known: death was only a phase. The Zenthari were still reeling from the shock of her resurrection, their commands scrambling in every direction. From the ship's central command center, Luna could feel their panic bubbling up like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Korith and Dr. Kith were frantic, their voices laced with a growing desperation as they tried to regain control of their precious vessel. But there was no control left. She had won. She leaned back in the captain's chair, observing their chaos unfold through the large viewport in front of her. The black void of space stretched endlessly beyond the glass, but it was the Mind Ripper's interior she focused on. The ship was her playground now. Every system, every weapon, every inch of this mechanical beast was under her command. Her fingers hovered over the controls, but Luna wasn't concerned with the ship's immediate fate. It would survive. The Zenthari might have had the power, the technology, but they had lacked something vital. Something human. Dr. Kith slammed his fist against the control panel, his frustration palpable. The screens in front of him flickered and blinked erratically. The ship's internal systems were corrupted, every attempt to regain control thwarted by a mysterious force. His alien eyes darted to the data flowing across the screen, scanning for any clue to explain what had happened. It was impossible. No species should have been able to do this. Luna Hayes shouldn't have been able to do this. She's playing us, Kith muttered, his voice trembling. We can't even trace the source of the interference. She's bypassed everything. Korath, ever the pragmatist, looked over Kith's shoulder. This isn't just interference, Doctor. She's rewriting our code. She's remaking the ship as if she understands it. Kith's face twisted with disbelief. It's not possible. No human could. But Korath's voice was sharper, cutting through Kith's disbelief. She's not human anymore. Luna couldn't help but chuckle under her breath as she watched the Zenthari scramble. They hadn't even begun to understand the gravity of the situation. They had spent years, decades, hunting and experimenting, believing they were the superior species in the galaxy. But they hadn't accounted for the one thing that set humans apart: adaptation. Luna's mind flashed back to the moments before her death. The pain. The endless torment. And then, the quiet. The darkness. And then, nothing. Nothing. It was the most profound stillness she had ever known. And then, as if it were a simple flicker of a light, she had returned. But it wasn't just that she had come back. It was the knowledge that came with it. Something ancient, something primal, had stirred deep within her. She understood something that the Zenthari never would. She was not the same person who had entered that lab hours ago. She had transcended. The Zenthari were wrong in their assessment of her. They had reduced humans to predictable creatures, easily broken by pain, easily bent to their will. But humanity had always been about something more. It was about resilience. About pushing against the limits of life and death, and in doing so, expanding beyond them. They had never known what it was like to be a human. Not really. The comm system buzzed to life, and Luna's eyes flicked toward the panel. Commander Vex's voice crackled through, strained and clipped. Miss Hayes, this charade has gone on long enough. You're still aboard our ship, and you will comply with our commands. Your resistance is pointless. Luna's lips quirked into a smile. Pointless? You still don't get it, do you, Commander? There was a brief silence on the other end of the comm before Vex spoke again, his voice cold. I'll give you one last chance to surrender. You can't control this ship forever. We will find a way to stop you. Luna leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she pressed a few keys on the console. I think you've misunderstood, Commander, she said, her voice now low and unyielding. I'm not trying to control the ship. I'm freeing it. And I'm freeing everyone you've ever tortured. Vex didn't respond immediately, his silence an unsettling acknowledgement that he understood the weight of her words. The truth was, the Zenthari didn't control the ship. Luna did. Back in the ship's control room, Kith and Korath watched as the screens before them continued to glitch, their systems failing one after another. The neural disruptors they had prepared were useless. The ship's weapons were offline, the security systems were scrambled. And Luna was somewhere out there, walking freely through the ship as if it belonged to her. What do we do now? Korath asked, his voice cracking with tension. We need to neutralize her, Kith replied, the fear creeping into his voice. We can't let this go on. She has control of the ship, and we don't. What do you suggest? Korath asked. Kith's gaze darted to the walls, as though searching for a way out of this nightmare. We need to stop her psychologically. Humans break when you force them to confront the truth. If we can make her question herself, make her see the impossibility of what she's doing, we might be able to regain control. Luna continued walking through the halls of the Mind Ripper, a quiet smile playing on her lips. The Zenthari might have thought they could break her. They might have thought that their methods, their superior technology, could make her submit. But they had underestimated the one thing she had always understood, the human spirit. She had died, and she had come back. What was death to a species that learned, that grew stronger with each failure? The Zenthari could never understand that. She reached the calm room and paused for a moment, her fingers hovering over the panel. Her mind raced. She had already taken control of the ship, but she knew there was more to be done. The Zenthari needed to be shown, needed to understand, what it meant to mess with a human. Humans didn't break. She pressed the button, activating the comm system. "Commander Vex," she said, her voice a blend of cold confidence and quiet triumph. "You should have understood what humans are capable of. But now you will. This ship? It's mine." The Mind Ripper had gone silent. Its once crisp hums and mechanical clicks now felt like the ghosts of a ship that had lost its way. The ship was still a massive, imposing force in the void of space, but it no longer held the same weight. Luna had taken control, and everything about it, every monitor, every system, every pulse of power, had shifted to follow her will. Commander Vex stood at the helm, his fists clenched at his sides. His body was tense, a coiled spring ready to snap. The ship had once been his, a symbol of Zenthari superiority, and now, it felt like a prison. He could feel the walls closing in, the knowledge that Luna Hayes had done something none of them had expected. She had not just survived their methods, she had mastered them. The tide had turned. "We need to act fast." His voice was clipped, sharp with urgency. Dr. Kith was hunched over a bank of consoles, his fingers moving frantically over the control panels. The monitors in front of him blinked in an erratic dance of failure, data being overwritten faster than they could process it. The control systems they had once maintained with ease were now slipping through their fingers like sand. "This can't be happening," Kith muttered under his breath, his voice trembling. "We've never faced anything like this." Vex's gaze never wavered from the screens in front of him. "She's toying with us," he said, his tone cold, but underneath it, there was something else, fear. "She's showing us just how powerless we really are." The ship, once a symbol of Zenthari might, had been rendered almost helpless by the human girl they had tried to break. Luna had turned their technology against them, manipulating it as if it were her own. They had underestimated her, just as they had underestimated every other human. And now they were paying the price. Luna, for her part, had settled into her newfound power with an eerie calm. She had been through too much to feel anything other than relief. She had died. They had tried to break her. And here she was, standing at the heart of the Mind Ripper, not as a prisoner, but as the one in control. Every Zenthari system she touched bent to her will. Everything they had built was now her playground. The Zenthari had spent years perfecting their technology, their methods. Yet, in the end, they hadn't seen the most important truth. Humans, despite their fragility, were relentless. They didn't just endure, they adapted, evolved. And Luna, who had once been nothing more than a passenger on a merchant ship, now held the power of an entire research vessel in her hands. She moved through the ship like a shadow, her fingers dancing over the consoles as if they were an extension of her own mind. The Zenthari soldiers who patrolled the halls, once confident and fearless, were now scattered, uncertain, as they found themselves outmatched by someone they had dismissed as weak and frail. Luna paused as she approached a large viewport, looking out at the stars, her thoughts briefly drifting to the humans she had left behind. They would never understand this, not yet. But she didn't need them to. She had learned a secret, a truth, and it had changed everything. She wasn't just a human anymore. She was something more. Back in the control room, the Zenthari were scrambling. The panic in the air was palpable, each member of the crew feeling the weight of their collective failure. Commander Vex stood tall but defeated, watching the monitors flicker with Luna's handiwork. "We can't let her have full control," Kith said, his voice edged with desperation. She's rewriting everything, Vex. She's turning us into nothing. Vex's eyes narrowed. We still have the neural disruptors. We still have the weapons. If we can target her. It's too late for that, Kith interrupted, his voice strained. She's locked us out of everything. If we attempt to attack, she'll turn it against us. She's learned how to navigate our systems faster than we can react. Vex's fists clenched, his patience wearing thin. Then we do what we should have done from the beginning. We break her mind. We force her to see that she's nothing but a human. That's all she is. Kith hesitated, eyeing the other consoles as if searching for an answer. And if that doesn't work? Vex's gaze hardened, and his voice dropped to a low growl. Then we kill her. If she can't be broken, then we end this. Luna could feel the tension in the air as she walked through the corridors, her every step echoing in the silence. The Zenthari were still trying to assert their control, trying to reclaim the ship. But it was futile. Every move they made, every system they tried to access, was countered by her. They were out of their depth. She could almost hear them scrambling in the control room. They were panicking. She grinned to herself. Let them panic. It was their turn to feel the helplessness she had felt when they first captured her. They thought they could control her. They thought they could force her to bend. But they hadn't understood. She was a human. Humans were far more dangerous than the Zenthari had ever realized. The more they tortured her, the more they tested her, the stronger she became. And she wasn't done yet. Luna reached the central access point to the ship's most vital systems. She knew she had to act quickly, they would come for her soon enough. She wasn't afraid. The Zenthari had only one weapon left, and Luna knew exactly how to turn it on them. Commander Vex was growing more impatient by the minute. The neural disruptors had been readied, but it was clear that they wouldn't work as easily as he had hoped. Luna had already outsmarted them once, and now she was playing a different game. A game they couldn't follow. We can't keep fighting her on her terms, Vex muttered. He turned to his remaining officers, his eyes hardening. We'll have to trap her. Kit's voice was barely a whisper. She's too clever for that. She already knows how to counter every move we make. Vex stood still for a moment, considering their options. Then he spoke, his voice steady, almost with a sense of finality. Then we'll give her a taste of her own medicine. We'll turn her own strength against her. But as Vex spoke, Luna was already several steps ahead. She had broken them. And as the Zenthari planned their next move, they didn't realize one thing: she had already won. Luna's fingers hovered over the ship's systems, her eyes fixed on the main control panel. She had no need to prove anything anymore. The Zenthari had underestimated her at every turn, and now they were paying the price. She was the one in control, and no matter how much they tried to fight back, they would never understand what made humans so dangerous. Not until it was too late. Luna pressed a final sequence of keys, locking in the ship's systems, ensuring that she had control of everything. There was no more need for games. No more need to run. The Zenthari were finished. The Mind Ripper had become Luna's domain. The once pristine corridors, designed for cold efficiency, now seemed like pathways of her own making. The Zenthari had long since lost control of their precious ship, and it was only a matter of time before they realized that their fate had already been sealed. Luna walked down the hall with the confidence of someone who had just unlocked a great truth. The Zenthari had failed to break her, and they had no idea that they were already too far gone to reclaim anything. Her footsteps echoed in the silence as she passed the control room where the final remnants of the Zenthari resistance were struggling. Commander Vex and Dr. Kith stood behind a line of officers, staring at the flickering screens as if somehow the ship might come back to life under their command. But it was useless. Luna had rewritten the rules. The power, the weapons, the very life force of the Mind Ripper had been claimed by her. And now, she was going to make them understand something far deeper than mere survival. She approached the observation window that overlooked the command center. Inside, she could see the tension in the Zenthari's movements, their fidgeting, their desperate attempts to gain some sense of control. They were playing the same game they had been playing since the beginning, assuming they could outlast her, force her to submit, break her in a way they thought they understood. But they had underestimated humanity. Luna activated the comms, her voice a sharp contrast to the chaotic hum of the ship. "Commander Vex, Dr. Kith, I think it's time we had a conversation." Vex's eyes darted to the screen, his lip curling in frustration. "Enough of your games, human. You've played your part. You can't keep this up forever. We're coming for you." Luna's laugh cut through the static, dry and cold. "You don't get it, do you? You still think this is a game. But it's not. It's you who are trapped now. Not me." Dr. Kith stepped forward, his expression as icy as ever. "You're playing with forces you don't understand. You think you're invincible, but you're not. You've outsmarted us, yes, but you'll break. Everyone breaks." Luna's gaze fixed on Kith, her eyes narrowing. "You're wrong. Humans don't break like you think we do. We adapt. We grow. We learn from our failures." The Zenthari paused. The walls of the ship, the advanced technology that had once been their greatest strength, now seemed like nothing more than a cage. Luna's words settled into the air like a challenge they couldn't ignore. They had underestimated her, and more importantly, they had misunderstood the very thing that made humans dangerous. Back in the control room, Kith turned away from the screen, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on his ability to dissect species, to understand their weaknesses and vulnerabilities. But Luna wasn't like anything he had studied. She had died, come back to life, and now she was walking through the ship as if it belonged to her. He didn't understand it. He couldn't understand it. She's not just a human anymore," Kith whispered under his breath. "We've never encountered this before." Vex stood stiffly at the center of the room, his fists clenched, eyes locked on the main monitor. He wouldn't give in. Not to a human. Not to a species they had dominated for centuries. "We are not finished." Vex's voice was low, almost detached. "We've always had a backup plan. We've always had a way to end this. It's time we use it." Kith looked at him, his expression tense. "What are you talking about?" Vex's lips curled into a thin, cruel smile. "The core. If we can overload the core and force a shutdown, we can take her out. We will destroy her, destroy everything. She's too dangerous to leave alive." Kith hesitated. "But the core is essential for the ship's power. If we do this. If we don't, she will end us," Vex snapped, his patience thinning. "This is the only way to ensure our survival." Luna's voice came through the comms again, smooth and calm, a stark contrast to the panic brewing among the Zenthari. "I know what you're planning, Vex. You can try to overload the core, but it won't work. You're not as clever as you think. I've already locked you out." The words sent a ripple of shock through the room. Vex turned sharply toward the screens, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Luna's voice softened, almost mocking. "You've been playing this game for so long, Commander. But I've already anticipated your every move. The moment you try to tamper with the core, I'll make sure it's the last thing you ever do. You won't be able to restart it. You won't even be able to reach it. It's over." For a long moment, the control room was silent. The Zenthari officers exchanged looks, their confidence shattered, the reality of the situation setting in. They were outmatched. The plan to destroy her, to wipe the slate clean, had been nothing but a desperate, futile attempt to regain control. Vex stood motionless, the weight of Luna's words sinking into him. He had been so sure. So confident. But now, it was over. Luna leaned back in her chair, the hum of the ship now a steady, rhythmic pulse. She could feel the tension that lingered in every corner of the vessel. The Zenthari were done for. They were playing a losing hand. She glanced at the viewport again, the vastness of space staring back at her like an infinite canvas. There were no more battles to fight. The ship was hers, and the only thing left was to decide what to do with it. Now, she said softly to herself, now the real work begins. Her mind wandered back to the Zenthari, Vex, Kith, and all the others who had thought themselves invincible. They had underestimated her, just as they had underestimated every human they had ever tested. They thought they had mastered death, broken the human spirit. They hadn't. She had. The ship's systems were at her disposal now, and she wasn't about to let them go to waste. There were more answers to be found, more knowledge to gain. And though the Mind Ripper had been designed for destruction, she would use it for something greater. The Zenthari, despite their technological advances, had always been limited by their arrogance. Luna, however, had learned the greatest lesson of all, that life, death, and everything in between could be redefined. Humans weren't just survivors. They were learners. Adapters. And she was going to teach the universe exactly what that meant.